Starting recording in 3, 2, 1. Blake, are you going to speak?
Oh, you guys don't get it. You're clearly not big brain such as myself. Since we're talking about a silent movie, I thought we'd do a silent podcast.
Oh,
All right.
Gotcha.
You guys obviously don't watch Rick and Morty.
He was really excited to do that joke.
Oh,
You guys obviously don't watch Rick and Morty.
Oh God, is that why you shaved your head and you have those like fangs on right now?
Yeah, I'm just really getting into character. Got to look like Nosferatu. I got to sound like him, which he doesn't sound. It's a silent film, so we're doing a silent episode.
He might sound. He's been alone up
You
in that
don't
castle
know.
for a long time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another.
He's got to get creative.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Half a Clue Movie Review. I'm Blake.
I'm Ron. Hello.
I'm Jason.
and I'm Miles.
Ron, what are we watching this week? Even though I already spoiled that for our audience.
This week we will be discussing 1922's F.W. Murnau's classic film Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror.
Oh my God! And why would you pick this movie, Ronald?
Well, because it's one of the most iconic films ever made, incredibly influential, and arguably the first ever horror film. It achieved its dark atmosphere by its pioneering use of shadows and stark imagery. Murnau's gothic nightmare was realized by being shot on location in Germany and Slovakia. Many of the film's locations actually still survive to this day, including Orvos Castle, the setting of Count Orlok's domain.
Nice.
So, before we get into it, I do believe some background is needed to truly appreciate this classic piece of cinema. So, let's dive into a little bit of history. This film was shot during the peak of German Expressionism, an artistic movement started in the wake of the horrors of World War I. Defined by its emphasis on capturing the thoughts and feelings of the artist rather than depicting reality, in film, it's often meant capturing a subjective point of view of a character, typically through exaggerated, distorted sets, lighting, makeup, to emphasize a state of mind.
Man, this really is the difference between a Ron episode and an everyone else episode.
I know. I'm
We
actually like getting all this
We
information.
we learn things when Ron's in charge.
Well,
He's like the half of the clue that's there.
He's the half part.
Yeah.
well, we're trying to get, we'll see if we can...
It would just be called Clue if it was just Ron.
Okay, so the three most well-known and arguably most influential films of this movement are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, released in 1920, Nosferatu in 1922, and Metropolis in 1927. And I like that because all three of those really show like the broadness of this movement, and it's kind of like it's a little tough to define at times, but like it can be all three of those things: sci-fi, horror, psychological stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so Nosferatu was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is, yes. To sidestep legal issues, this film changed names, locations, and even plot details. This ultimately failed since Bram Stoker's widow sued the filmmakers and won. All copies of the film were then ordered to be destroyed. But thanks to pirating, woot woot, a few copies of the film survive that we can still enjoy to this day. Nosferatu was written by Henrik Galeen, produced by Enrico Diekman, and Albin Guru. Guru was a noted occultist whose influence can be seen throughout this film, including the use of Enochian as a language used by Count Orlok in the letters he sent to Knock. That's like the language that was like, it's like a 15th century angelic language that was used in tons of occult stuff. And there's also tons of
if you watched Supernatural, you've heard it referenced many times.
Oh yeah. It's a lot of people like to like throw that into stuff to make things seem more legit. It's like
It's
spooky.
Make it more occult.
Yeah, like kind of like I think it's Letters to Solomon and stuff. Like a lot of those kind of things, to really add to it. But apparently, Guru was one of those guys who really did believe in like a lot of occult magic and stuff like that, and he wanted to make a slate of occult films. But this one caused him to go bankrupt, probably because all the films had to be destroyed, so they never got to make any more movies, which is really unfortunate because who knows what kind of movies we could have gotten, but whatever. All right, so quick overview of the plot, including some spoilers, but you have had an entire century to watch this movie.
Dude, think about the viewers at home. They were just about to get to it.
I know. It's been in your watch list for a long time, but here we go. The film is presented as the recounting of someone who knew Hutter, our main character. He tries to explain the cause of a great plague that almost wiped out the town of Wisburg. Hutter is a young man working for the sinister-looking Knock, who sends him to Transylvania to sell Count Orlok property in Wisburg. As Hutter makes his way to Count Orlok's castle, Villagers warn him, no, of the evils that lurk there. Once we meet Count Orlok, we can see why. He's the creepiest looking dude you've ever seen. He's kind of,
I don't know. At that point, he was like the second creepiest. I think the boss was far creepier.
Oh, Knock.
Knock is
Knock.
very creepy.
Yeah.
Honestly, like watching it the first time, I was like, I thought Knock was somehow related to
Exactly.
Orlok.
He's just
Yeah.
fucking evil from the beginning. But sorry, continue.
No, yeah. It's like you seem, I don't know. Yeah, we can get into it, but yeah. So Orlok, so once we meet Count Orlok, well, he's creepy, yes. After a few spooky nights, Orlok packs up his coffins and ships himself to Wisburg, with both death and plague trailing closely behind. Once in Germany, he eventually finds his way to Ellen, who sacrifices herself. Getting drunk off her blood, Nosferatu doesn't realize the sun is rising and then is destroyed by sunlight.
Rookie move.
Eviscerated.
Yeah.
Apparently, that was the first time that that was like this is like the introduction to the sunlight destroying vampires myth.
Prior to that, Dracula just was weakened by the sunlight, right?
Yes, exactly.
This is like the first time it was like a big no for them.
Yeah.
When I was watching it, what I got from it was that not only was it the sunlight, but he also had to be lusting after a maiden.
Yeah,
In the sunlight, in order to his lust needed to be exposed to the light of day in order for it to burn him. At least through like the cards that I saw, that was the interpretation that I got.
Yeah, it seemed like something had to do with like her specifically like sacrificing
Like enticing
herself.
him and giving herself up.
Yeah.
But not by the oh God, what's the line?
The
Not by
the crow of the cock.
The crow of the cock, or the
Crow of the
crow
It looked
of the
like
cock.
the crowning of the cock, but that's not what they said.
No, that was a weird W.
Well, one thing with this film is like things like that, those translations that were
Yeah.
done, are those the original intentions?
I mean, it's
of
also
the
a movie
translated?
from fucking 1922, so there's obviously a language barrier.
That's the thing too. Is
And
like,
it was in German,
Yeah,
not
it
in
was in
English,
German.
but you know
Yeah.
they redid all those title cards
I don't know
in
about
English
you, but I'm gonna
much later.
I'm gonna defeat Nosferatu with the crowing of the cock. So was this your guys' first time seeing it? It was for me personally.
It was my first time seeing
Yeah, it
it.
was my first time as well.
I tried watching it a few years ago, like because it is public domain. There's a million different versions of this movie that are
Yeah,
out
there's
there.
a bunch on YouTube.
Yeah, so like I think the first time I watched it was like a Daily Motion kind of like version, and it was really shitty, like even shitty for a lot of the surviving like footage of it, because and I just kind of like gave up like halfway through, but we watched it all the way through this time, and it was definitely worth it. It did take a few times to like. I was also trying to find the best version to watch, which is another apparently like semi-controversial thing. There's a lot of different like translations, I guess, that have happened. Some people have like redone the title cards just to change the names of all the characters to the actual Dracula's characters and stuff, which can be a little confusing because they're not exactly like their counterparts. Some of them kind of line up, but it's a little tough. But and also the biggest thing for me was the music.
Yeah, aren't there like different like scores set to it?
Yeah, like apparently there's original sheet music. The version that we watched, which is on Amazon, it's like the in color version. Like it's supposed to be kind of restored, but I didn't really like the color of it, so we changed it. We literally just desaturated the TV just to watch it like that. And I think it works better in black and white, but there's also different tinted versions that are meant to distinguish night and day, which was kind of the style of the.
I think like
silent
maybe
era
if I
time.
watched it again, I'd try and watch one of the quote unquote colorized versions. But for a first time viewing, I think
Yeah,
you definitely have to do it in black and white.
Apparently, the colorized version makes it a lot easier to understand when it's day and night.
Yeah.
Because that was a problem for me because it looked like he was just in full light walking down the street.
When he's holding his coffin,
Yeah.
he's like,
Oh yeah, definitely. And
It was a great scene. He's just holding his coffin for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably shot during the daytime for a
Oh,
lot of
yes.
those scenes because back then those cameras you couldn't really shoot at night very easily and actually capture anything worthwhile. You needed full lighting, like,
Absolutely.
for every single shot.
There's actually really interesting photos of like studios, how they were built back then. Now studios, they black out everything. They black out sound and light, and so that you can have complete control. In the old days, they looked like old greenhouses, all made of glass, all transparent because they needed as much light as possible to get in there. So it's a very, very old school technique. Because like you said, cameras were not as sensitive as they are now. Now we can like basically shoot in almost complete darkness and get some decent images out of it, But back then, no, they needed as much as they could get.
Yeah.
So all the night scenes were shot during the day, and it's noticeable. It's very noticeable.
So back to what you were talking about with the colorization, right, and the different versions like that, the different types of title cards that they've had throughout the years on these movies, and also the different scoring. I think that that's a really interesting thing about these older films because they didn't have a dedicated soundtrack, because they didn't have voice lines and things like that. You could take these silent films and change the story very easily. And, that shift over time of taking a story and improving upon it. We talk a lot about how directors like George Lucas have changed their movies over time in bad ways. But do you think that, this shows that there's the potential to make changes in good ways for films?
No, because you said, sorry, Ron, you mentioned that there are versions where they have title cards that change the characters' names to fit the Dracula more.
Yeah.
I fucking hate that. That's stupid as fuck. Just keep it as is.
Yeah, I think there's...
But you've got names like Knock and Hutter.
Who cares?
And
It works for the movie.
like weird
Knock's
names.
a good name.
Yeah.
Knock is a great
Okay.
name.
That's a front runner for my child.
Okay.
I think it works because you want to get as close to the intention of the artist, I think, so you can kind of feel what they were trying to show you as closely as possible, which, to be fair, watching it in black and white is different because they did want the tinting. But that's one change where it's like it's preference at that point, I feel like, so you can kind of like go about that yourself.
Well,
But
What they wanted it like a sepia tinting or something?
yeah, so usually it was like a sepia or yellowish kind of tint that they would give to the day scenes, and a blue to like even greenish tint at night, so you can distinguish it easier, which does give it a different feeling. It does give it like a more classic era, like silent era film like feel to it, which is cool. And personally, I like the kind of degraded quality of the film because I feel like it adds like a creepiness to it. Like it makes it feel like you're watching some old lost footage that you shouldn't even be seeing or something like that. It's like, ooh, like, I don't know. It's got like an extra darkness to it, which I like.
Yeah.
I heard that there's an edit where they thought that that Nosferatu was too much of an asshole for biting Hutter. Can't fucking keep track of these names. They thought that Nosferatu was too much of a dick for just biting Hutter for no reason, so they added something where Hutter bites first. Kind of.
Yeah.
Oh God.
They should have.
They added an
Yeah.
explosion at the end where there's a giant ring that comes out.
Yeah, exactly. There's a
I really
CG.
liked the Nosferatu's mansion song scene where there's a bunch of like aliens singing and playing music.
Yeah.
So
They added like a alien that's dancing around.
yeah. So I kind of agree with you guys on especially the title cards and changing the names. Yeah,
Which is
that's
dumb.
It's yeah, that's kind of dumb. But when it comes to the tinting, I think that tinting is important versus black and white. I don't really agree with the colorization of it. I think that it's interesting to think about it in those terms, and it does take a lot of effort, but you do lose out on something. But in terms of the accompaniment, right, the music, I think that that's very interesting. That because when you would go show these films, right, you know, this is before home movies and everything, far before that, right? You know, you would go out, it would be a night, it would be like going to see a play.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you would go to see a play, the orchestra would make changes.
And they would
right?
they'd be playing live there as you're watching it.
And they
which
would
is
play
cool.
their performance that they wanted to play with it. And I think all the different soundtracks that you can get in these different versions, I think that's really interesting because it is about the artist's intention, but it's also about the feeling that the performers who are performing that accompaniment, that music for you, have at the time.
So how did you guys feel about the music that was accompanying this one? Because I tried to find one that seemed to be closer to the original, and I think this is like close to the original soundtrack.
It was pretty dope. I liked it.
It was very tiring.
You think
It made me want to
it was
sleep.
a lot.
It was like very relaxing and very like calming. It's not the hyped up type of soundtrack that you get nowadays on what's the guy, the one who Michael Bay film or something,
It's not Hans Zimmer, that's for sure. Yeah.
Hans Zimmer's Nosferatu.
I would actually love to see Hans Zimmer do an accompaniment for Nosferatu, just as like a passion project.
There's what's funny is like only a few years later, like less than a decade later, when they came out with Universal's Dracula, 1931 with Bela Lugosi, they didn't really use a soundtrack for that one. There's no accompanying soundtrack to that because they thought that it was like a old-fashioned, like antiquated thing to have soundtrack. They're like, oh, we're talkies now. We don't need music. We just have people speaking. So they didn't actually have a soundtrack for it. And it existed that way for a long time until 1998. Universal got Philip Glass, who did the soundtrack for, I think it was The Truman Show and a bunch of other like classic films and stuff, to create a soundtrack. And he did. He made an original soundtrack with the Kronos Quartet, and it's so good. It's fantastic. And that's one of those where the music adds way more to the film, and it's very impactful. And that's why with this film I was like, I really want to find like a good soundtrack. And for the most part, I think this one was good, but there are certain parts, like especially the first night when Nosferatu is like coming into Hutter's room, that I feel like it could have been better. It felt a little like it felt extra campy in that moment, and
yeah,
I was a little disappointed. I think they could have gone a little more sinister or something. I don't know.
There were moments of the film where I exactly what you just said, where I just felt like the music was not matching the tone of the scene.
Yeah.
And it felt like sometimes they're just like randomly picking a song just to throw in there. Which, whatever, it's 1922, gives a shit. But it was strange.
Because the music has such an influence on it. Because I feel like, because there are some modern soundtracks to it, which are like a little more like electronic soundtracks and stuff, which I think are weird.
I would
No,
say
I don't
like
want
that.
It's like the Drive soundtrack, but Nosferatu.
Yeah.
There's something about you. It's hard to explain. I just imagine Nosferatu on the boat. There's something about you, boy, but you're still the same.
He never changes.
He's giving you a night call.
But yeah, no, I think for the most part it works, but I would be open to like a modern orchestra's interpretation. Like if they were doing like a live showing with Nosferatu with an orchestra now, I think that would be really awesome. I think
that would be
super
really cool. Yeah.
I want a hip hop show about Nosferatu.
I want to hear Kendrick Lamar's take on Nosferatu.
Honestly, that'd be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, it would actually be pretty dope. Get like Thundercat doing
Turn
like
it into
production.
like a rock opera or something. Fucking why not? It's a weird, out of date fucking what's it called? Public domain property.
Yeah.
We
I mean,
can
that's
all
the
do our
thing.
weird shit with it now.
Yeah, because it is public domain. Anyone is free to just like shit out their version of it too, and just like you can do whatever you want. No one's gonna sue you at this point. That production company doesn't even it existed. It ceased to exist right after the movie came out.
Yeah, because they got bankrupt by the fucking. Oh, it's crazy. I didn't know this too. Because of the lawsuit that ensued after, they were actually ordered to destroy every single copy of the film.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
I said
No,
that.
Ron already said that.
Okay. But I didn't know that prior to this week, and I just find that kind of crazy.
It is crazy, and it shows how lucky we are to even have this around. Because I think it's like 90% of silent era films
Or gone.
Yeah, they're gone, and that's crazy. Because who knows what kind of like how many more influential films are completely lost to time that we just don't have any chance to look back on.
Yeah, because didn't they used to just, put them out to the theaters and then get the film back and then they would recycle the film?
Yeah,
because it was dangerous to keep that film stored.
Super flammable. And and film was expensive.
Yeah.
So they were just like, we're going to reuse it. And a lot of times just like film, like, negatives degrade over time. So, and improperly storing them and shit. Like there's a lot of reasons why like that's just gone now, which is very sad.
I didn't even know prior to this that this was like an unauthorized take on Dracula.
Yeah.
When I always just thought Nosferatu was like the German word for vampire or some shit. I always just thought it was an authorized one, so that was kind of
It's a
fun to learn.
Romanian word.
Yeah.
That means like undesirable one or something like that.
I miss when vampires were as sexy as this,
yeah. Really, they should go back to like very attractive vampires like Nosferatu.
Yeah, Robert Pattinson don't got anything.
Robert
on
Pattinson ain't
Nosferatu.
got nothing on Nosferatu. Do you guys think that this holds up in terms of being scary?
No. I mean, it's not really a scary film, but I don't
It's
think
unsettling.
that it's unsettling,
It is,
yes.
it is.
But
It's got
like,
some crazy fucking imagery, I think.
It's so good. That holds up, I think, for sure. Like,
And it's some of the most iconic imagery in film history, I
Yeah.
think.
no, it's a great movie. I'm saying it's not scary, but that doesn't necessarily make it a bad horror film or
Why do you hate this movie, Miles?
sensibilities change over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and for the time, it's crazy seeing that, like, especially the actor who played Nosferatu,
Max Schreck.
Max Schreck. Oh my gosh, like the makeup that was done and just like his visual style, like that he was able to utilize for his posture when he was moving.
Yeah.
He looked creepy. He looked other
fucking
non-human.
fingers.
Yeah, how did they?
It was
Ron,
great.
you probably know. How did they make his fingers look like that?
I don't actually know. There's a lot of secrecy behind the effects, makeup, and everything they used for this film, or even the lighting techniques. It was like there's a lot of closed off stuff, and I'll be honest, I didn't look too deep into it, but there was like rumors going around because Max Schreck wasn't super huge after this. So there was a lot of rumors around that like he was a vampire and all this shit, and that's they played that up in oh my gosh, what's that? It's a movie that came out like in the 90s with Willem Dafoe playing Max Schreck. It's
Something the Shadow of the Vampire. I think
Yeah.
you said it was.
yes, and oh my gosh, oh my god,
What We Do in the Shadows? Is that what you're thinking of?
no, the I'm trying. John Malkovich is in it. He plays F.W. Morale.
That's good
Murnau.
casting.
Yeah, and he's like losing his mind, and it's like really creepy and weird, and that's like their explanation for all like the crazy stuff they got to do. But man, if we want to get into like the visual effects and stuff, I didn't notice until like rewatching it that his fingers, like you're saying, they look really like long and super needle-like and are iconic now. For like the first half of the movie, before he's on the ship, they just look more like normal fingers.
Yeah.
And I think as he's like draining the life out of like the sailors and everything, you see him like
Monstrous form growing.
yeah, which is really cool. And I didn't notice it the first time, but it's like when he's like rising out of the tomb, which is such
That's
a good
one of the
shot.
coolest shots of the whole fucking movie.
Yeah, and
So
they just
cool.
get him to like stand straight up, and he's like
Yeah.
fully planked. Like, how did they capture that shot? Because like that's tough to do.
Yeah.
like he wasn't moving at all, and obviously they had to use like some sort of stop motion to do it.
Maybe
but like
it's so
hi-
smooth
his-
though, so
yeah.
that's like what's crazy.
it looks stop
it's
motion,
smooth, but it's
smooth.
just not
Yeah.
smooth enough to give you that uncanny feeling of like this isn't right.
Yeah.
Like this isn't human.
It's
Kill
so
that
good.
fucking thing.
Yeah, as he's like stalking around the ship, and you see his like sinister look, or the one where like the sailor who's like tripping balls, and he sees like his ghostly image and stuff. That's great. That's one of the things I loved about this is like Nosferatu's like his area effect basically. As anybody's around, like people are just slowly going mad and like are just creeped out by him, and even as far away as in Weisberg, where like Knock is just kind of crazy right off the bat. And it's like, is he just like that? Or did Nosferatu make him crazy with that
Do
letter?
they not kind of imply that he's like has a connection to Nosferatu? Because they say something like, "Oh, he's a big businessman, and that's all we know."
Yeah,
So he starts kind of going crazy towards the end, and it seemed like in the beginning scene where you first see Knock, he is reading the letter that's written in Enochian from Nosferatu, and you can kind of visibly see his face and his mood change just slightly.
That's how I got it. That's
Where
what I picked
it's like
up.
he read that and he was able to read it somehow, but through reading it, he was put under the spell of Count Olaf or Nosferatu.
Yeah, that's what I
Orlok.
got from it. Yeah.
Orlok. Sorry.
Olaf.
Is that like
I don't
those
Olaf.
You know what? I will say
Frozen?
no,
No,
Knock,
Count Olaf is
yeah.
What is Count Olaf?
That's
That's that show you like. That's that show
That's
you
a
like.
series of
Series of
unfortunate
unfortunate
events.
events.
Oh,
unfortunate
yes.
events. I will say no. Knock did look like Count Olaf.
A little bit, yeah.
in like the TV show of
little
series
bit.
of
Yeah.
unfortunate events.
I'm sure there was
Yeah.
inspiration because even his like his outfit and everything looked very Orlok like, you know.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I would say
where was I?
I would say this movie is still scary in the right setting
eerie.
and circumstance. Yeah.
It's eerie and
it's very
unsettling.
vibey.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just an unsettling kind of
It's unsettling
feel
and
throughout.
creepy, yeah.
But once he gets there and once he like meets Orlok, it's just like kind of creepy. But no, I'm not scared, and that's fine. Like some of my favorite horror movies, I don't consider scary.
That's the best kind of horror. Is just
like
where
The Shining.
it makes you feel like, I don't feel so good watching this. And this has a lot of that where there's just all this imagery and it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
don't really
I imagine
like this.
again, it's like dark night, you're watching all the lights off and everything by yourself. You'd probably be pretty creeped out. And it would have that definitely like extra eerie feeling with it. And it's great. It definitely picks up. Once Orlok shows up, that's when the movie really
Yes, it
off.
does take a minute to get going. There's the whole thing with the werewolf, and it's just like a dog.
Oh, it's
God,
a hyena.
It is a hyena.
Or a hyena.
Also, at that point, you start seeing less of Hutter.
Yeah.
Like the whole movie, because it is a silent film, they have to exaggerate, their movements, and they have to
that's
exaggerate
part of like
their
German
acting,
expressionism, right?
right? And Hutter, he always just seemed so overly like exaggerated, like that smile on his face, like
He's just so happy. all
very
the time.
wide-eyed, and
He's
and
reading
throwing
that fucking
his
vampire
arms out
book
everywhere.
going,
Yeah.
He picks up, he just throws that book away.
But
Just tosses it down and starts belly laughing.
If this is the first horror movie ever made, I like that that's just a horror protagonist fucking staple from the get-go.
just completely ignoring
Any
the
kind of
warnings.
sign of bad.
Yeah.
But I will say, then once Count Orlok comes in, his acting is more reserved, more mechanical, very like rigid, and
He only blinks once in the whole movie.
Oh, I didn't notice
is
that.
it?
At the end of the first act.
Okay.
Well, one of the things I like too is that this has so many like staples now that are used in horror and everything, but the building up and the suspense that is there, like we see Orlok move in on Hutter and presumably feed on him multiple times, but we never actually see him feeding until the very end when he's like drinking Ellen's blood and you see him like, and he looks like a vampire bat.
Such a
like,
good fucking shot too.
Yeah.
And you just see like the top of his face. Just
you see his fangs
sitting
like,
there.
yeah, like that really pop and everything. It's good, and it's like there's a level of restraint there that's like waiting to show you like the in its full glory this this vampire actually feeding, because you don't exactly see it, but then it works. It is funny though when Hutter wakes up and he's like, yeah, these like mosquitoes bit me on my neck. What are the chances?
Idiot.
Yeah, they don't have the like basically what's standard now. It's like you get bit by a vampire, you turn into a vampire thing.
No, that doesn't seem to be a rule in this.
Seems like they just die typically.
Yeah.
Which is weird because everyone else who got bit by him died pretty quickly. Hutter did not.
No, I think I kind of got maybe that he's like slowly gaining his strength back, so he's just like just really feeding off him a little bit, and then once he's like on the ship, he's like full strength and he's just wiping out the whole crew.
So I do like the interpretation of vampires. My favorite interpretation is that if a vampire bites you and like drinks your blood, you're fine, right? But if they feed you their blood, that's when you become a vampire.
That's a supernatural.
Yeah, but I think that's
vampire.
also
Getting all our knowledge from
isn't that also a Dracula thing?
I'm not sure. That is a thing.
Yeah.
That is one of the, depending on what world you're talking about, where some vampires do that. Like there's a few versions out there that like you have to actually drink their blood first, which they'll like feed you or something or force feed you or whatever.
If anyone's going to know the answer, it's you, Ron.
Yeah.
You would know the most.
Usually
about
they give you a
vampires.
golden chalice,
or
and
something
filled
like
with their
that.
blood. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like this interpretation. It's a much more primal version of a vampire, like Orlok. Even though he's like, he can kind of contain himself for the most part, except when when Hutter like cuts his finger is when the only time he kind of breaks character.
He's like,
and,
ooh.
yeah, and he like
Don't
tries to suck
spill
his
the
I
finger.
feel like that's a trope though now.
Yeah.
Like whenever like in movies a vampire sees blood, they kind of like lose their shit for a second.
There's that
Yeah.
iconic scene in Twilight.
Oh my God.
Where he's just like, fuck. He can't contain
Just took a
himself.
lot from Twilight, honestly.
yeah, I'm shocked.
Can I talk really, really briefly about how much this movie reminds me of The Seventh Seal?
Oh yeah, no,
Have you guys seen The Seventh Seal?
No.
I have, yes.
No, I have not.
What a shock. Ron's seen it. So The Seventh Seal, I'll summarize it super, super quickly. It's a movie about a man who meets death, who's there to, take him. And then he challenges death to a game of chess, saying, if I win, I get to live. It's just very similar in the fact that they're both movies about men talking or like dealing with like a supernatural entity that deals with the anxieties of death. And that movie also heavily deals with the plague. That's a huge part of the movie.
Yeah, it takes place I think it's during one of the Crusades, and he's like a returning Crusader knight.
Yeah, and he's like, there's
like
all this
town has been wiped out by plague and stuff.
It's not just the plague, but the war too. Like the war, the plague, just everyone around him that he knows is like dying. So it's about like the anxieties of death. And throughout the movie, death keeps returning to play chess with him. Mm-hmm. It really reminded me a lot of it visually and like in the story. Like I said, just two movies about a supernatural force that's kind of representing the anxieties of death and disease.
What's crazy to me too is like, this film takes, from when it takes place, like the actual film, I forget what it's like, the 1800s, late 1800s.
It's like 1857 or something.
Yeah. For like perspective, that's like if we today made a film that took place during like World War II, is how this film would be if it took place, and during that time period. So it's really only like a generation removed, which kind of it's crazy because it feels so much closer to it as well, like of that time period. It has like a little more sense of like authenticity.
That's just how time works. I feel like when we look at something that old, it's harder to separate those also time eras.
We don't know what's authentic. I mean, this was 1922, right?
Mm-hmm.
So none of us were alive in 1922.
Speak for yourself.
Most of our parents were alive in 1922, vampire. As far as I'm aware. Actually, I don't know. There's probably a very limited number of people because they would be 102 years old if they were born in 1922 today. So this is,
they're on like Good Morning America segments, Yeah. Happy 105th birthday to Betty.
So the authenticity is just that it's older than our memories,
old to us.
Right?
Yeah.
And, when we look back and we look at World War II movies and stuff like that. Well, we have footage from World War II.
Yeah.
Right?
There's footage from World War I as well.
Yeah. But we look at this and we see, okay, but there's a lot of footage, right, from World War II.
Yeah.
Right? And that era.
There's less footage of one, but yeah.
And we know what that time period looked like, right? Mm-hmm. And it's something that's instilled in our consciousness, We have ready access to those records, whereas further back, you don't have that. So maybe that's why it feels closer, just because it's like that.
Our dumb brain just see old timey stuff and go, oh, that must have been how it was in the 1800s as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. But
that's true. But going back to what Blake was talking about, that general feeling of anxiety of like surrounded by death, like I think F.W. Murnau, Garreau, the producer, and even Max Schreck, they all served during World War I. They like fought in the trenches and shit. So they saw a lot of like those horrors that happened. And part of that is like, I think that has to do with a lot of the rat imagery. There's a lot of like different reasons why they might use the rat imagery, but like it carrying like plague and death and everything like it's a very heavy element in this film. Nosferatu looks kind of rat-like as well. And even like, he's like a mix between a bat human and a rat, I think.
Well, he was more
bat rat.
He was more rat-like than bat-like, I think, in this.
He does like, I feel like the bat, it's kind of like how he stands, right? He has this very like he holds his hands up like they're wings.
Yeah, even his claws, like his shoulder pads and everything, they kind of like, they give him almost like a silhouette of like a grave, like of a tombstone or
coffin.
A coffin, yeah.
God, the way they shoot him is incredible. That's like crazy, just how like fucking poignant he looks, where it's like,
very imposing.
One of my favorite shots is when Hutter goes down to the basement and he peeks through the coffin, and it's just like just a little slit. And you see his face poking through, and it's just so creepy. He just like, you see his fangs like really stand out, like white. It's so creepy.
Yeah, his teeth are very rat-like.
Yeah,
They don't like line up for where the bite marks are, which is kind of weird.
It's, and even that like that look for a vampire has kind of like stuck around in certain interpretations. Like my first thought is like 30 Days of Night, or even like some of the Blade vampires and stuff, where like they kind of have that more animalistic look and feel to them, which I like personally. I think those are really cool versions of the
The critic from Ratatouille kind of looks like him.
He kind of does, actually. Yes.
This movie should have ended with him eating a childhood dish and then like going, I remember. He gets like a special kind of blood he hasn't had since he was a kid. He's like, oh, I'm just going to go home now.
One thing that I noticed about this film, so Hutter, you know how he basically ties his bed sheets off and it goes down the side of the room?
Yeah, to like escape the castle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 comments on that. First, why didn't he just walk out the front door? Dude was asleep during the day in a coffin and he's the only other person there.
Yeah.
I think it might be implied that he's locked in somehow. They don't show that.
I mean, he
But,
had
like, if
access
you're
to
escaping-
he could get to the basement. It's like not like
Maybe there's like
Yeah.
some lost footage somewhere that shows him like trying to open the door and he's like, nope.
Okay.
or something.
And second thing, when you're making like a rope to climb down out of your bedroom, make it long enough. You know, like
Yeah, he just knocked himself out.
Maybe
like-
he ran out of sheets.
I mean, like, I guess, but you could have just torn another sheet like a little bit more in half. Like plan out
I
better.
mean,
man.
he's lucky Nosferatu even has any sheets. He doesn't use sheets.
I
He
don't
sleeps
know.
on dirt.
I was like, what is going on with this?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's he does knock himself out pretty frequently in this. Hutter does have a tendency to pass out.
He's like a cartoon character.
He
honestly.
kind of is, yes.
Yeah.
That's
I know
like
that's
that-
part of the expressionism part of this.
Well,
Yes.
it's just silent films in general.
Yeah.
You have to, like, everything was so exaggerated.
They,
all
they
the
were, they were
time.
coming out of like that like theatrical stage, like, you know, kind of actors and performances that were, you know, so they didn't always necessarily translate because you have to project and everything. And now the cameras are much closer and that's not really necessary. So I don't know. There's some of that.
So should we have been watching this movie from like half a mile away? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe.
just to get like the correct amount of his exaggeration.
Yeah, to scale, like
Yeah.
really, yeah.
It's crazy talking hadn't been invented by 1922 yet.
Yeah.
or any real like color, you know, it's all just black.
Everything was black and white and silent back then. We just have to look at each other and go, ah. Title cards would come up and we tried communicating. Weird world, weird world.
Yeah. I don't know. Was sign language invented by then yet?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because that
I
would
would
be,
imagine
that
so.
would be interesting if like
Is that too early for like a movie like Coda?
no,
Yeah,
but
I mean, well,
you
if
know what
it
I'm
like-
saying though. It would be interesting if there was like a silent film that was like a sign language like film back in the day, like where they were able to get past like the issues of not having sound.
That was one of
Well,
the
what's
lost
with-
movies.
The earliest form of sign language was in the 1500s.
Oh,
or,
wow.
wait.
Well, when were deaf people invented?
You're trusting Google?
No, I was wrong. Ancient civilizations. That's what it says. And then the first known was the 5th century BC Greece.
Okay, but,
Well, I
but
think-
what like modern sign language, like actual
Like
like
ASL.
It's been the same
community-
since then.
Like when was ASL?
It's been the
invented?
same
Yeah,
since.
this is I love you in 5th century Greece.
Okay.
Well, going to like, I think your thought like, well, what's also really special about like silent films is it was when kind of films had to didn't really need necessarily to translate. Most of them focused on the imagery alone, and you could kind of get away with telling a story purely through images and stuff. And that was actually one of the things F.W. Murnau said that he wanted to do was achieve a purely visual film. He didn't want any title cards, no dialogue, nothing. Just to show a film that is just a story that's just being told through this very special medium, which is images and without sound and anything.
Well, there were very few title cards.
Yes.
There was quite a few though, because
But I mean, he wanted to do that later.
there was a lot of because there was a lot of like calligraphy and writing and characters reading books and letters.
Yeah.
That was like a huge part of this movie, I felt.
Because this movie does kind of require, like, you could probably do a version of this without like the title cards and you still pretty much understand exactly what's going on. And that's kind of special. Like, you know, that's like a lot of films, like, you know, there's no, like, for even like, I don't know, like early Tarantino films or something, obviously you wouldn't understand what the fuck is happening at all, pretty much, if without like the dialogue.
Reservoir Dogs is a silent film.
Yeah.
Hey,
Like, they
Ron,
don't work, you know?
Remember how I told you my favorite way to watch, Christopher Nolan movies and Denis Villeneuve movies is I like to watch them on a plane on somebody else's screen where I can't hear what they're saying. So I like watching films
That's
silently.
the intended viewing
Yeah,
experience as well.
So
Tenet
exactly.
might actually make more sense if you do that.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're supposed to watch it on a DS.
exactly. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
With the broken
looking,
speaker.
Yeah, looking over the armchair at like some kid just watching it.
It'd be easier to follow Tenet if there was no audio.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's, honestly, you could watch a lot of films nowadays like that are the big budget action films. And it's like you get the same thing out of them, whether they got sound or they don't.
Miles found a way to shit on modern movies. What?
But yeah, like because right now there's like silent films obviously aren't really made today at all anymore. Like most people don't even want to watch black and white films. Like if you tell someone like this movie's completely silent, they can be like, what the fuck? But the only things that I've really can think of that have like kind of pushed that idea, like there was Primal on Adult Swim for a while, which was like Gendry Tarkovsky's like the first season is nearly entirely silent. I don't think there might be like one word or something that's uttered in that first season.
Would you say made that?
Gendry Tarkovsky.
I thought you said
that might be
Tarkovsky.
I'm
I was
definitely
like, he's alive and making animation on Adult Swim.
I'm probably butchering his name. I might be mixing it up, but he's the guy who did like Samurai Jack and other stuff I can't think of right now. But the Clone Wars series and stuff. He made a show that was like just purely visuals, like it's a T-Rex and like a primal man, and they're just like going on adventures, and there's no dialogue because neither of them can speak.
It's very
really.
good looking. It was enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it's pure visual storytelling, and I don't know. There's something else similar. Oh, there's like Phil Tippett's Mad God. There's no dialogue in that, but it's just purely visuals, and the visuals are insane. But yeah, so like it's still possible to do today, but I think it can be very demanding of an audience, and a lot of people just aren't.
And Coda wasn't entirely silent, but there were a lot of scenes in there that didn't have dialogue.
Well, I mean, but even then they're signing.
But
that's
I
still
thought
dialogue.
it was well. So when I first watched it, okay,
You watched it.
I watched
no subtitles.
Yeah, I watched it. Well, yeah, the version that I had access to had no subtitle track. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm watching this without subtitles then. But I still got a lot out of it, and I think that it was still a good movie. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's the best, like one of the best markers of a good storyteller, like a filmmaker in particular, is being able to tell a story without like dialogue, or really just being able to watch it and completely understand. So, would you say this film makes you want to watch more silent films?
Yes. I mean, I have enjoyed silent films in the past. I know, like, this week I was trying to get a time together where we could all watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which I've watched in the past, and that was an interesting silent film. I think that was my first introduction to German Expressionism.
Nice.
So
that's like one of the staples.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was after this movie. I went on Letterboxd and looked at lists. Ron, another reason you should check out Letterboxd is I really like the lists function where you can find similar liked movies all put together. I went to a silent film list and I found this movie called Destiny, directed by Fritz Lang. Sounds really interesting.
Nice.
It's like I don't know. It just sounds like it has like a pretty cool plot, and I could see why it would work just on a visual level.
It's crazy too because you can see the evolution of film, like just growing exponentially too. Like again, it's wild to think that this movie came out less than 10 years before Dracula, Universal's Dracula, and there's such a leap.
Is that the one with
technology.
Christopher Lee? Or
no, that's the one with Bela Lugosi.
oh, okay.
And
When's the Christopher Lee one?
That's the I want to say like 70s.
Oh yeah, I was way off.
But even then, it's like that's still like less than a century. That's 50 years, and that's like there's so much like
It's
innovation
changed by then.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Well, I mean, once they really understood how to shoot film, right, and actually use film cameras, right, to make movies, it's not quite as hard to capture audio as it is to capture the visual medium. They just hadn't had a reason to figure out how to do it and how to record it in the same way.
Yeah, well, like sound, synchronized sound was like considered a novelty.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was with the was it the jazz player? I forget. But it's like the original like first sound film with sound or whatever, and it was like a huge deal because it was like, oh wow, like you can actually hear them speak, and it added a whole other layer to it. But
What's the first sound movie?
I think it's the jazz singer. Might be wrong. It's like, yeah, it heard nothing
Have
yet.
you seen it?
I have not. No, I want to watch a lot more silent films to, I guess, answer my own question. But it's like I want to see F.W. Morale's like follow up film where he because like I think he made 10 films in total and like only 3 of them survive, and one of them is called Faust, and it's like about man, you know, making a deal with the devil and everything, and it's supposed to be very good, and you see his like evolution in like as he goes along. It sounds very interesting, and
I've got the book.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. And it's like, and a bunch of those like, and there's so many other ones. I mean, from like Buster Keaton to like, you know,
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin, there's classic for reasons. Like, you know, a lot of them still hold up.
Have you seen The Great Dictator?
Yes.
No, but I want to.
I know you love that
Excellent
movie,
film.
Jason.
Yeah, it's great. But also, what's interesting is that movie is like half silent film. Like, there's not a lot of dialogue until, you know, obviously the iconic speech at the end.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is just like, you know, Charlie Chaplin running around like slapstick comedy. But it's good. I recommend it. It's
That was-
a good, like, I don't know, stepping stone, I think, for
The
Hollywood
transition,
into
yeah.
talkies, I guess.
I guess we should probably talk about the Robert Eggers film that's upcoming.
Yeah, this Christmas.
Coming this Christmas, someone's coming to town. And he's bringing joy and love with him.
He looks like a rat.
He looks
He'll
like a
drink your
rat.
blood.
He's got rats. They're going to give you the bubonic plague. It's going to be a great time. Guess who's not invited to the Christmas party? So Robert Eggers is coming out with Nosferatu, and I do have to fucking say, I couldn't think of a better director to tackle a remake on this subject
yeah.
matter. Like, fucking love Robert Eggers. I've seen both The Witch and The Lighthouse. I've still yet to see The Northman. It's been on my list. I'll get to it. But are you guys all familiar with Robert Eggers' filmography?
Yes.
I'm the
surprised,
same.
I'm surprised you like him, Miles. He seems...
I thought The Lighthouse was a good movie. The Witch, I think I've seen it. I'm not 100% sure. But
I love The Witch. White House was awesome. Northman was like super badass. I think they're fun, they're innovative, and they're like it's just like dripping with atmosphere. And like, oh, it's so good.
I fucking love The Lighthouse, especially. Just the classic two men go crazy kind of movie.
Yeah.
With a lot of like cosmic horror kind of in the background. And just Willem Dafoe is amazing as always.
Yeah, talk about a send up with the 1-to-1 aspect ratio and everything. Like it felt like it was another one of those like lost films that.
It does, and that's why I think he's the perfect director for this, because he's also very good at period pieces too.
Yeah.
So
All of his films really have been period pieces.
Yeah, he hasn't made a modern movie. So I think he's perfect for something like Nosferatu, where he can really capture the essence of the time it's supposed to be being made in. He can really get that. I imagine the plague will be a big part of the movie, because I think if anyone can make the plague terrifying, I'm sure he can.
Yeah.
I have a question about the plague. Maybe I'm just dumb and I didn't get it. Was that a genuine plague caused by the rats, or was he just eating everybody?
he was just eating everybody.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
But
I think
they
there was
ascribed
both,
it to the
honestly.
plague. No, because they said that the young people, they had the 2 dots on their
That's-
neck. That was
that's
one of the
true.
symptoms of this plague.
But it did feel like a lot of other people were just dying.
Dying.
Because like even after he leaves the like, because when they flip over that coffin and all those rats spill out and everything, they say that harbor town is like been ravaged by plague, and we just see him getting basically just put right into the ship. So
I like the thematic idea that he's bringing a plague with him as well. That's a really cool idea, that not
Yeah.
only is he personally going to go and fuck up this town, just his very essence has brought like pestilence with him. That's such a fucking metal thing.
yes, yeah, and I think even the like in the opening card they say he was like spawned from this like demon thing or whatever. It's like one of the kings
Oh,
of hell,
yeah.
and they're like basically like the king of pestilence or whatever. They're like one of those things. I don't think it's like necessarily like the 4 horsemen kind of thing, but it's like it's like somewhat tangentially related to that. I forget, but so that like the idea of him bringing like plague and stuff is very intentional, I think. But I also think that they mix it up with like he's actually eating people and like killing people too, with also like them dying of plague. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of both.
So sidebar, going back to the Robert Eggers adaptation that he's going to do of Nosferatu. So we've talked a lot on this podcast about how a lot of times when remakes are done, they're done poorly, and they really shouldn't have been done in the first place.
This one makes sense, though. It's a fucking silent movie.
But that's what I'm saying. So why is it, do you think, that this is a good movie to remake?
Well,
It's a silent movie. Like, I think, I mean, we've talked about before, like, the reason you remake something is because you didn't have the ability to do certain things in the past. So, like, I mean, they couldn't speak on film back then. So, yeah, I feel like this is... And I don't think this is the first remake of Nosferatu.
No, it's not.
There's one in, like, the 70s, maybe?
Yeah, Werner Herzog remade it, starring Klaus Kinski as Nosferatu. And he, at the time, he said it was German's most important film ever made was Nosferatu, or Germany's most important film ever made.
Germans.
And so he had like a lot of like passion to it. He did change things up. I haven't seen that version yet. I really want to though, actually. But
called- that sounds dope.
Nosferatu the Vampire,
Yeah.
1979.
and it's supposed to give like Count Orlok a lot more like pathos and everything. Like he's basically a creature that is like, you know, he's like hungering for love, and basically his affliction as a vampire is treated more as like a curse and everything, and he has to like carry that burden with him that he's starved for affection but also for the blood, and how those things clash, which is a common thing now really in vampire lore, is that idea that they are like, you know, dealing with the curse of immortality and all that stuff. But apparently it's a very good adaptation, so
I'd be down to watch it sometime.
Yeah,
I'm down.
I'd like to.
Couple of weird things. His name is Count Dracula in that movie. It's not Orlok. And Van Helsing's in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is this, a crossover episode? Something about the Robert Eggers movie I'm excited for, too, is that Nicholas Hoult is going to be playing Hutter. I think that's like a really good casting.
Oh yeah.
I do find it interesting that Bill Skarsgård's going to be Count Orlok.
He's just Monster Man.
He's just like, he's
really is.
contractually obligated to play every horror person now, I guess.
I think he's a great choice though. Like I know there's a real common thing that happens where like every couple years we have that like breakout star where everyone casts them as everything and everyone. But I think this is actually one of those like brilliant castings where I'm like, no, I think he's actually very, very suited for that role. Also because he's very tall and like slender as well. So he kind of just has that frame that works very well for Orlok. Like I don't know exactly how tall he is, but I like that Orlok is like really towering over everybody. If they like enhance that somehow where he's like basically like 6'4" or something, that'd be awesome.
The poster is like him just out of frame and you can't quite see him. It's really dope looking.
Yeah, that's one thing.
I really hope they don't show him in anything. I'm probably not going to watch any other trailers aside from things I see at the theater, but I want that to be like a surprise when we first see it.
Yeah,
Because
they don't show him in the trailer. There's that fucking awesome shot in the trailer of her walking up to the window and you see him silhouetted in like a drape that like flows out due to the wind, and it's just like, oh, that's fucking perfect.
Yeah, that final confrontation, there's like just iconic image after iconic image. Like you see his like shadow reaching up to her chest and like grasping her heart and everything. It's so good. Him like filing up the stairs and everything, which apparently wasn't a part of the original script or shot list, but F.W. Morale just wanted to add it. She just threw it in there. He was like, "We need this shot in there," and it works because it's like
dope.
It's super iconic. You just see his shadow. You don't even see him, which is like it's so good.
Basically, every shot of him is iconic, except for my favorite because it's so goofy. Is him walking across the street with the coffin? It's so funny looking to me for some reason.
It is kind of
he's like
funny.
literally looking both ways, going.
Just like scurrying across.
Or when he's just like floating across like the little stream. That for some reason there's just like a little stream.
Oh yeah.
In the middle of the road, it seems like.
Yeah. I like when they have vampires having like that kind of those weird status, like the magic effects where it's like you see him like phasing through doors and like little things like that where he's just like
When he like moves things with his mind, like he gets
coffin
into the
lid.
coffin and then he closes it with his mind.
Yeah.
The way they shoot that was really cool too, where it's very smooth but still kind of unnatural looking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was on purpose or that was just what they were limited by. But
I think
either
they just did really good stop motion.
But either way, because it looks a little unnatural, it's just so like, ooh, I don't like that.
It's very creepy. And even like, okay, so the way that F.W. Morale shot this, again, because we said it was during German Expressionism and stuff, he really kind of focused that in on Orlok himself rather than like the rest of the film, really. Because most of like, again, because like Dr. Caligari, it's like super exaggerated, like pointy sets, like light is painted on the walls and shit like that. This one, it feels surprisingly naturalistic. Like there's a lot of like exterior shots that are like really well framed, and like there's a lot of stuff like that which you wouldn't necessarily associate with classic
surrealism
German.
and expressionism.
Yeah, but he chose to really channel it and just point it directly at Orlok as like this kind of otherworldly being that again moves unnaturally, that like does weird creepy shit, like his shadow extending towards a doorway and stuff like that. Like it's very cool, and I feel like that's I don't know, the to show that restraint as a filmmaker in that time period is so dope. I don't know.
Yeah, I was half expecting, because I knew that this was a surrealist film, and I had watched Dr. Caligari before, right? So I was expecting that, okay, the beginning's kind of normal, but I was expecting when he got to Transylvania, right, that would be like the surrealist world that he was entering into in the film.
Yeah.
And I felt like, are these buildings going to be kind of misshapen? Things going to be weird? Like the castle is going to be, weird and strange and stuff like that. But it just wasn't. But it still fits so well because the characters.
Very subtle.
Yeah.
Because even the Orva castle that they show, it's kind of a weird looking castle. It's like very like long and like it's kind of like leading off of the edge of like a cliff. It's not like your standard looking castle, which I like.
But it's not quite surrealist.
No, yeah. And then because it's real.
Yes.
So there's a real one there. And then you go inside of like the dining room scene, like when he first meets him. Like that one, I don't know if that was a set or not. I don't believe it was, because I think they tried to shoot on location. But like the windows are very tall and slender. They kind of look
The
like
chairs
Orlok.
as well are very tall and slender.
Yeah, like it's like, again, where it's like that the precision choices to be like, okay, well, this is where we're gonna like really flare up a bit, is like it like even the candlesticks have like that same kind of silhouette look to them. It's really nice. It shows a lot of the intention that was there from the filmmakers, which is
Definitely.
amazing.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts? Would you
Yeah,
like to start, Miles?
I think that this is definitely a very important film, very interesting. I would like to see a very definitive version of this film at some point. Like we've said before, there's so many that are in the public domain, but
I think this might be as close as you can
Yeah.
get.
Yes, but I think that maybe, some of the really good companies, like if there was a Criterion release that they put a lot of effort into, right? And maybe even a multi-version Criterion release.
Ooh, that would be really cool.
That would be interesting. Where, it's a pick your own adventure type thing,
Yeah,
where
if you
you
want
can
it
kind of like
into-
select like, hey, how do you want to see this movie? I think that would be really cool. Arrow would also be a great company to do that. And maybe even like Kino as well.
I believe Kino does have a version out.
Does
too.
Kino have a version?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of those, like, not necessarily super definitive, because I guess a lot of people have also criticized it for its version as well. But it's one of those that's out there, which, if you're interested, that's kind of one of the most I guess accessible versions that are there. Like they fix because one of the problems different versions have had is like the frame rate being off, like, so it had the very like jerky old kind of feel to it, but people have tried to adjust for that and stuff. But,
Okay. That's cool. But yeah, so I don't know. I think once I find a version like that, it's definitely something that I would put on my shelf. It would fit right in with a lot of the older, weirder films that I've got on there. And I think it's a good movie. I enjoyed watching it. It's not necessarily something that I would watch, every year, or every, blue moon even, but it's definitely something that I could see myself watching it again in the future.
I agree. I would definitely watch this again. I don't think it would be. It's not going to be on my yearly Halloween list. That's just, it's a little much for that. But I certainly enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed seeing a lot of influences that it, the way it influences modern film even today. It's cool. I'm happy it exists. I'm happy they were able to preserve it. I think that's important. So yeah, I'm just happy I watched it. It was good. Good time. Ronald?
I think it's a great snapshot of like an era, especially like it's obviously very important for film history and everything. There are so many things that it laid the precedent for like horror films in general. Like I said in the beginning, it's considered like arguably the first horror film because some people say that there are a few other versions, but a lot of times earlier silent films that used scary imagery, they often played them for laughs. Like I think Haunted House is like 1913 or something like that. But this film does its best to really create an atmosphere and tension and suspense. And that's something that was very unique to this. Caligari did something also very similar. So it's like you could really kind of go back and forth between which one of these films is like the first horror film or which one which one had the greater influence, honestly. But it's tough to say.
Yeah. So I would say I wouldn't even consider either of these to necessarily be horror films. I believe that they're progenitor.
Name, dude.
Yeah, it's a symphony of horror, Miles.
Miles,
Okay.
you just don't think anything that's good is horror.
No,
That's your problem.
Okay, no, well, yeah, possibly. But what I was going to say is I feel more so like they're both progenitors of the horror genre, right?
Sure. It's
they're
like,
forerunners.
It's like Black
think-
Sabbath
yeah.
to metal,
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, no, I mean, when you have something that's new, right? Something that goes against the grain, something that hasn't been done before. It's not necessarily part of the things that follow and precede it, right?
But I think if it invents the horror genre, it is a horror movie.
yeah, I would agree there.
It's a horror movie about a vampire that kills
Okay.
people. What do you want?
It's a horror film.
What do you
Okay,
want?
okay, fine,
What does
fine.
something have to be?
I would definitely call it a horror film. But yeah, no, I think it's really I don't know. It's very interesting. I think it still holds up for the most part in terms of like its creepy, eerie atmosphere. I think once you get to like Act 2 and 3 onward, like is when it really starts becoming that like classic film. It's a film that like I would love to like watch with other people too at some point. Like I think like you said though, like a definitive version or a version that gives you those options and everything would be really cool. Anybody out there that wants to do that, please do it. Because like just different options of like different soundtracks and visuals and stuff would be really fun. I guess it is, but you just gotta like search for it. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it a lot. It may be a minute to like I rewatch it as well, but it is one that I do want to revisit at some point. And it's got me really interested to watch other vampire movies, which is something I was like so burnt out by vampires for like a minute because it felt like for most of the 2000s it was like vampires and zombies were like the main thing that was around everywhere and it was just done to death. But like going back to like the OG, I think this is like arguably I think this is the second or third ever vampire movie ever made, but it's the only
What was
like
the first one?
There was two other ones that were like the 1910s. I forget what they were called, but like one of them there's like no physical version. I think there's no surviving copies of the originals of the first ones that were actually also adaptations of Dracula as well, but like they don't exist anymore. They probably also got destroyed. But this is the first surviving version that we have. I forgot my point, but the point is, like I want to watch other vampire. Like I want to watch the Klaus Kinski version. I want to watch like the 1931 Dracula again. Like it's got me back into that mood, which I really love. I feel like this is a movie I maybe even watch like in September just to get me back into like the spooky mood or something.
to get you prepped for spooky season.
Yeah, because it is the progenitor for all this that we get to enjoy today, and that's pretty awesome, So give him credit where it's due, Blake.
Well, obviously, I really liked it. It really does contain some of the most iconic like shots in history. whether you've seen this movie or not, I feel everyone has seen those images like of Nosferatu in the hallway or at the door. Like one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is that scene when Hutter is trying to like hide away in the shadows and Nosferatu is just like fucking walking in and like just standing tall over him. It's such a like
it's like he's entranced by his whatever aura that Nosferatu gives off.
It's just so like creepy. So I really like eerie movies like this. They're kind of like, oh, I don't know. And of course, as it's been said before, obviously this is a very important movie for film history. It's dope, and I also really hope that either Criterion or Arrow or someone does exactly what you said. That's a really cool idea. If they could have like a multi-disc box set or something that just has different versions of this movie and how it's cut with different music and different adjustments being made, I would spend the overpriced amount that they're asking for immediately.
Just like a side thing, I remember in my quest for like finding a good version, there's one I found, I think it was like on YouTube, where basically the title cards were like Comic Sans, and I was just like, not this one. Nope, like immediate disqualification.
Well, you know, Comic Sans is actually everybody hates on Comic Sans, but it is it is an effective typeface.
We're doing this, aren't we?
For no, if you're putting out notices like in offices and stuff, it is an effective typeface, and people who are either dyslexic or who have ADHD are actually far more likely to read it.
Really?
Than other fonts.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So yes, it's bad, but it's actually like useful. Like they did studies on this shit. It's weird.
That's
but
crazy.
You mentioned Comic Sans, so I have to mention that. It's a bad font, but it is useful.
Yeah, if someone hands me a memo that's all Times New Roman, my eyes are going to glaze over. But Comic Sans, maybe.
You got to use impact.
Yeah.
You guys want to talk about what we've been watching?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, me, Miles, and Jason. Sorry, Ron, you're left out. You're the odd man out.
It's all right.
All watched a great movie called The Kid Detective last night. I don't think we want to get into it super because I think we might want to talk about this eventually.
Yeah.
But it was fucking dope.
It was an interesting film, a lot different than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. It's definitely one that I would
What do you think it was going to be?
I thought it was going to be about a child doing detective work. I thought it was just going to be like a goofy.
I mean, in a sense, it is.
That is kind of what it is.
But I thought it was just going to be like a goofy, campy little kids movie, and it,
No.
What was that? Like Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys. Like I thought it was just going to be something
Bloom.
like that. Yeah, but it was not, and I was thoroughly surprised and happy about that.
Adam Brody's in that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a really fun movie with a lot of heart to it.
Very, very well shot. Like, oh my
yeah.
God. Fucking gorgeous cinematography.
What was it called again?
The Kid Detective.
When did it come out? Do you know?
2020.
Oh, okay.
You should definitely check it out. I knew very, very little about it, but Jason's friend brought it over last night. It was like, you want to watch this? We're like, sure. And I was like, oh my God, this is shot amazing. And not to get too into it, but there is a turning point in the movie where you're like, oh my God.
It was like the first
they're
thing
going for this.
It was the first thing that Blake said to me as soon as I saw him. He was like, "We just watched this movie. You got to watch it." I'm like, "Okay."
I would love to talk about it on the podcast at some point.
Yeah.
It was
a lot of emotions in the film. There's a lot of like laugh out loud moments, and then like
there's a turn.
Yeah, it gets
It covers the whole range of emotions. Let's just say
So it's like Monster Squad.
Yeah.
It gets pretty dark.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was great.
So I wanted to say one of the things I watched this week was actually the original Night of the Living Dead.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
OMG.
That was a very interesting movie. It was somewhat different than I thought it was going to be, and a lot better than I thought it was going to be. You know, it kept my attention the whole time. I really enjoyed it. I appreciated a lot of the stuff they did. And looking at, because these are the original zombies, right? This is kind of where the idea of a movie zombie was
Talk
invented.
about birthing an entire genre. That's like, it's the zombie film that made what we know zombies to be now.
And you just see so many like little pieces that modern films like take from it, like it be it the characters or the things that the way that the zombies act, or what they're weak to,
The social commentary and stuff.
the way that the group dynamics of the individuals that just carry over into modern zombie movies to this day. And it's a fantastic movie. Definitely worth a watch.
I never saw George Romero's follow-up, Dawn of the Dead. I've seen Zack Snyder's version, which I actually do like.
I like that. I like that movie.
But
So
I want to see his version, his original version, a lot actually. But I've never seen it, which I don't know why. I've just never gotten around to it.
Yeah, maybe I should watch that at some time. I had not watched that one either. I've seen Zack Snyder's, but
That could be fun. It's also one that, again, like he kept that theme of social commentary, like, basically commenting on, we live in a society, but in a really great way throughout his zombie films.
Oh God, Zack Snyder and social commentary.
But he doesn't, though. That's the thing. Is Zack Snyder like kind of really just ignores that for the most
I'll
part?
make a cool zombie movie.
Yeah, he just wants to see heads explode.
Yeah. But George Romero, that was like a big thing, and that's a lot of things that carried the zombie genre forward, where they were just like, we're also commenting on, consumerism and kind of like the zombie mentality or whatever of like, modern society, which is very cool. Like he really set that tone from the beginning, and a lot of people, not everybody, have carried that idea moving forward.
We are the Walking Dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then there was one other movie that I watched this week, Spy Kids 3D Game Over.
I'm so mad
Yeah.
you guys watched that with me.
I'm sorry, we were just talking about it.
I would
I've been
fucking love to
I've been
watch
making jokes.
especially that one.
I've been
3D one,
Yeah.
dude. I remember seeing that
Is that
in
the one
theaters and
with
it blew my
Elijah
mind.
Wood?
Yes,
Yeah.
he shows he's the dude, right? Or the guy?
I'm the guy.
Yeah.
The guy.
no.
He's not the guy. He's a false prophet. He's a liar.
Well, he kind of is, and then he isn't. That's like...
But to preface this, for like weeks, I had been making jokes about like about like Spy Kids 3D Game Over, like being like, I would just like mention it here and there, just like joking because it is such a bad, horrible movie. And I was like, man, I actually need to watch this again, like make sure it's actually as bad as I remember. It was some of the worst CGI I have ever seen in my life. It was, they went pretty much 100% green screen CGI for the majority of the movie.
It's a Robert Rodriguez thing.
Yeah.
We'll have
Like
to do a Robert Rodriguez watch
and it was,
eventually.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it was
One of the
just
weirdest
bad.
careers ever.
He's weirdly one of my favorite filmmakers, and also a guy that I can't stand sometimes. I don't know, like his films, they really fluctuate from, like, I love Sin City, Desperado is like a classic, and then Spy Kids is also like super
Didn't he
fun.
make
The
those
original
for his
Spy
kids
Kids is
though?
good.
Like, because
I
because
think
I
so.
know
Well, same
for a
with Shark
fact,
Boy and Lava
that was
Girl.
literally
Boo.
like a movie that his kids pitched to him while they were hanging out, and he's like, "Okay, I'll make Shark Boy and Lava
Yeah.
Girl." Like that's kind of cool.
He's a dude. Oh man, he used to have one of my because he had his own network, the El Rey network. I don't know if it's still around or not. It probably is. But in it, he had one series that was called Director on Director, where he would sit down with other directors and they would go over their entire, or not their entire, but like their filmography and how they like evolved as filmmakers over time and how they approached different directing and stuff. And it was such a good show. I don't think they do it anymore, but I remember he like talks to Francis Ford Coppola, Michael Mann, like other Frank Darabont and stuff, and they're just like so fascinating to hear a perspective in him. And he was actually a pretty good interviewer too. Like he would ask like very good questions and stuff. And it was a series that I wish had continued because it was very interesting. But yeah, no, Robert Rodriguez, he's an interesting
definitely is.
director. Yeah, it goes up and down, up and down. Book of Boba Fett was dog shit.
What's his first movie? Machete? No, not Machete.
Desperado.
No,
Actually,
no.
El Mariachi.
I really want to watch that. That's-
Just to mention, Machete is set in the same universe as Spy Kids.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
because that's what they called.
That's
Danny
their
Trejo's
uncle.
character. It's Machete.
Yeah.
It's yeah, he's wild. I don't know. It's like if he comes out with something, it's been a minute honestly since like any of his projects have excited me. I didn't see Alita Battle Angel. I know it's like a cult classic now, but I don't know.
that doesn't interest me at all, to be honest.
Yeah,
it
I've
didn't
never
really
seen
interest
that
me
one.
either. But like I've heard people like really praise it.
That's one people online got really passionate about.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know. I might check it out at some point because apparently that was the big passion. One of the passion projects that James Cameron had. He really wanted to make that movie, but he was so caught up in Avatar that he basically handed the reins over to Robert Rodriguez, and that's just an interesting pairing to me. I'm like, I wonder. And apparently, yeah, people really wanted a sequel and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything else they want to talk about?
I rewatched the Batman this week.
Robert
Pattinson. We don't have to talk about too much because we already did a whole episode on it, but it holds up. It's
better
so
than
good.
The Dark Knight. Sorry, everyone.
It's the first.
It is.
So that was I watched it with Ron as well, and that was the first time that I've seen a superhero movie in like forever, and I actually enjoyed it. He had me. My faith is like slightly restored in superhero movies with this one, and I might actually watch more at this point.
Hell yeah,
So,
dude. We're anticipating a sequel in like 2 years.
Yeah.
It's 2026. Yeah.
You guys are like enculturating me. You're making me watch horror films and superhero movies, and I'm
Good.
actually enjoying them for once. Like,
Oh no, you have to watch things you don't
Yeah.
like.
yeah, but it was a good movie.
Yeah, it's better than The Dark Knight. Sorry, everyone.
It is.
Jason, back me up.
No, it is.
Thank you. Fucking at me.
I watched a movie this week called Psycho Gorman. Have you
Oh,
guys
I've heard
of
that.
this?
What is
What is
that?
that?
I have heard about that.
It's this weird kind of like splatter horror comedy about this like evil alien entity that like falls down to Earth, and he has this object that whoever holds this object will be in complete control of him. And a little girl, like a psycho 11-year-old girl, picks it up, and she has complete control over this killing machine who could literally destroy the earth like whenever. It was fun, but that's about all I could really say about it. It had a lot of really fucking cool effects and really cool makeup, and just the dynamic between the little girl and Psycho Gorman was just fun and interesting. But I feel like it could have been better. It does the whole thing where, like, they learn to like love each other in the end. Spoilers, but I think you could see that coming. And I don't know, it doesn't really work at the end, but it's a fun movie. I recommend it.
Is it like a modern movie or?
Yeah. It was like, I think it was 2020 or 2021.
Oh, okay, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it's a good time. Don't expect anything like fucking incredible from it. But
I'm expecting something incredible from it.
Speaking of Psycho Kids, we just watched the It's a Good Life or Wonderful. Yeah, It's a Good Life episode of Twilight Zone with the little kid.
That little fucking
Little piece
shit.
of shit.
Oh my god, dude, that's like a whole episode.
They're
we
all
could talk
they're
about
all a
themselves.
bunch of pussies. They deserve their
They
fate.
should, yeah. They
I
should have
counted multiple moments where someone could have just ended that kid.
They deserve it. I'm glad they're in that fucking reality because they deserve it.
For those who don't know, that's the I think season 3 episode of Twilight Zone. That is so good. I mean, it's obviously an amazing series, but like that episode in particular was just like such like a little microcosm of like why I love Twilight Zone so much. I was like, it's such a cool premise, and it's like great acting too, like across the board. Like as you see that dude who's like finally breaking down and just begging everyone to please just kill this kid. It's like, dang, I don't know. It's so good.
Dang. I rewatched the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie earlier this week. It's good. I don't really have that much to say about it. I will say, in retrospect, it's not my favorite, but only because you could definitely tell Wes Craven wanted to play it a little more straight. They hadn't quite gotten down that balance of Freddy Krueger yet. He's still very much serious, which is fine because it works. I think the only issue is that Freddy Krueger just inherently is kind of a goofy character. So there's like a scene where like the main girl's literally like on the ground wrestling with Freddy, and I'm like, this is hilarious. I don't care what you're trying to tell me. This is fucking funny. But obviously it's a classic, and in my opinion has the most iconic slasher kill, which is the first girl who's floating in the air, getting torn apart. Like that is the most classic and iconic slasher kill of all time.
Such a good shot, and the sequence, the whole
and
sequence.
when she's
is
like
great.
fucking gets flown to like the top of the roof and everything. Oh my god, it's so dope.
Funny thing, tying back to Nosferatu, Robert Ingold credited Max Schreck's performance as Count Olaf as one of his like inspirations for how he wanted Freddy to move. At least, probably most in the first one, especially like with his like really unnatural kind of body movements and like everything. So it all ties back, man. It's all this classic film.
Yeah.
But
So, speaking of black and white stuff, I forgot about this, but I watched the first episode of Umazaki this week.
Oh, dude.
Which just released, that is a black and white anime, Very interesting, very stylistic. It's about spirals and the horror of spirals, and it's
Hell
really
yeah,
good
man.
so far. Very unnerving.
Yeah, adaptation of
yeah.
Junji Ito.
I'm
I
not going to
haven't
spoil
watched
it for you guys, but you should watch it. It's worth watching.
I haven't watched it, but everyone who has watched the first 2 episodes who I've talked to about it have said there is a massive drop in quality between episode 1 and episode 2.
Really, I've
yeah.
only seen episode 1, so
Like my brother-in-law, he's legitimately, he was talking to me about this like 5 years ago. He was so excited for it, and he's just like, man, that second episode fucking sucked. And I feel bad for him, like, because he was so happy when the first one came out, and then also my friend who came over last night, he said the same thing. He was just like, but maybe there's hope for 3 and 4. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's disappointing because I like the Junji Ito, his like style of like really detailed like fine line illustrations work really well, especially in black and white. I feel like because there was a colored version of some of his stuff on Netflix, which I tried watching, and it feels like it just really stripped down a lot of the what makes his like artwork so interesting.
It almost so. The hand-drawn aspect of this almost made it feel a little bit like with rotoscoped movies, where
yeah.
it feels like the drawings are actually like moving a lot
animation?
more.
I'm just kidding.
Well, no, but
Like moving.
but you know what you know what I mean, because
know,
they're
I know.
like changing and shifting, and you get that a lot more than you get with like the traditional animation styles that we see, right? Where it's a lot of cell shaded. You don't get much of that.
Yeah, no, it was
yeah.
very well animated. At least the first episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very excited to see where I was very excited to see where it continues. I hope it holds.
I mean,
up.
I haven't watched it, so maybe you guys will love it, but
I hope.
I've heard bad things.
I've
about
never
it, so-
even heard of it until right now.
It's very cool, very creepy. The premise is like doesn't sound scary at all. It's like it's about spirals and like how this town is becoming obsessed with spirals. But it's weird.
That does intrigue me though. That's a cool plot.
It sounds like very Twilight Zone-esque, where it's like this town is just kind of becomes obsessed with something like seemingly mundane, but it's somehow like I don't know. It's very cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyways, anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about, or are we good?
No, that's it. Oh.
Well, that was good timing.
Okay. Hey, can you wait a second, Ricardo?
Just
we
let
gotta,
him-
we gotta put this up. I think it's unlocked if you come in. Is it unlocked? No.
The side door's unlocked.
The back's unlocked. Sorry. Okay.
I'm leaving that in.
Finish up the finish up the
Let's
outro,
wrap
Blake.
it up,
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much for listening. This is week 3 of Spooky Month. Sadly, it appears our Spooky Watchathon has almost come to an end. Jason, have you decided on your spooky pick yet?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with the film I have not seen.
And that might be.
It's a classic,
And that might be.
supposedly.
And that might be.
It might be Rosemary's Baby.
Oh yeah,
Ooh.
hell yeah.
Well, if you would like to keep up to date with us, make sure to watch Rosemary's Baby, and we shall see you next week. Thank you for listening. Happy week 3 of Spooky Week. Ooh.
Bye, everyone.
Halloween.
Bye.
Nosferatu.
Aw.